Jerry Gidel is ready to discuss corn and soybeans today, going down by about 30 cents in the week. He's going to tell you why, and also he's going to tell you why wheat can go up. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have plenty of things to talk about today. Uh, One of the things is the export market that was kind of deception this week and might have impacted those lower prices, right?
Well, exactly. This week's well, we were as defensive late last week as the forecast for rains that come into the U.S. winter wheat areas, and then we come to Monday, and our weekly export shipments were down from the previous week, below the needed ranges to get there in corn and soybeans and wheat along the way on the shipment portions of this thing from there. But really, the market was really staring at the U.S. weather forecast, and even the European model that everybody has a lot of faith in was really projecting a lot of rain coming out of Colorado, across Kansas through Oklahoma. Maybe not so much in the Texas Panhandle and that, but definitely in the eastern parts of Texas and that. Now, as we got further into the week, that rain activity that we actually got on the ground really was not maybe as intense as some of the forecasts were at this point. The Colorado rain was really in southeast part of the state, not in the northeast part of the state where really the crop prospects are at, and the rain activity that did go across Kansas was really below I-70 and really concentrated from there all the way towards Wichita and that. But even then, the rain activity was not 2 inches in every place across the state. And so that is an interesting scenario. We really, to even have a chance to get some of this wheat that's been dinged up, he's got to get at least a 2-inch shot. And if you're talking about a half or an inch of rain, it didn't do a lot of good. Now, the interesting twist on this, I've kind of checked with a couple contacts I have, one in the insurances world that handles clients and has contacts up in western Kansas and that, which is really your number one state for, U.S. wheat and that. The one thing that we started to hear in early part of April is that the adjusters are going out there making decisions about some of this wheat that was in very poor conditions, and they have the ability, if they feel like there really isn't a potential. Now, the one thing it's always tricky with wheat, but at the same time, if there wasn't an opportunity for like 10 bushels or 15 bushels out there, it's really expensive to run a combine out there to get 5 or 6 bushels of wheat. So in reality, it's maybe not completely dead, but it was very close. And checking with the insurance fella and then also a consultant friend of mine that has a lot of clients in that western parts of Kansas. And that turns out that both of them really said that an area south of I-70 and that, and interesting, I thought it was really only in the west central and the southwest districts of Kansas, but they both said that things were a lot further east than I thought. Some of them even farther, not all the way to Wichita, but definitely areas halfway through that central part of Kansas on the crop prospects, that things were really written off. At this point, there's some they don't have a great what idea the USDA is going to come up with, but they are very cautious that Kansas wheat crop prospects are going to be hurt very dramatically. And okay, we got some rain in Oklahoma, but there's some areas out there that had a similar situation. And Texas, I think a lot of graze out occurred in that state because of lack of forage, and also from the standpoint of the poor, because really there really wasn't a tremendous amount of rain very far west of Wichita Falls. And from there on through the into Lubbock and areas like that is where the dryland wheat is at. And nobody's real optimistic. I can pick up on that part of the world. So the wheat market, despite it continuing to back off here on things and the weather situations we've had through the middle of this week, I guess I'm really cautious about what could happen with the U.S. wheat crop estimates here in the month of May.
Yet the weather forecast for the coming days are not very good for the crop.
No, this rain activity that really was what happened is we had this big cool front that came down from Canada, and basically that rain activity was on that, if you want to say it, on the left bottom corner of that cold weather, and it's starting to retreat back a little bit now. Interestingly enough, the weather here in eastern parts of the U.S. Right now, our forecast here for Illinois, Indiana, even parts of eastern Iowa at this point looks like it's going to be on and off rains starting this sometime tomorrow afternoon on through till maybe Tuesday. So some of the twist of the rain that's maybe going to be somewhat beneficial for some areas of the eastern Corn Belt is going to delay plantings, and that's going to be the next big factor we'll be looking at on Monday is and what people are looking at there. So far, last week's numbers on planting, we were at 14%, above 11% 5-year average. And I have a hard time staring at the USDA's numbers for this particular week of the year and get to that low a number for last week. But they use a slightly different approach on making their estimates for the 5-year average than they look at the dates, not so much the weeks. And I think that to some extent, maybe extra complicated versus what they should do. But they're doing it that way, and they've been doing that way for 20 plus years. So they're not going to change that. But, I think the real factor in this thing is that one of the things that has come up here over the last, in my opinion, the last 5 or 6 years, is that some of our trend line expectations here are based upon a 30-year trend that really might not be following through here recently. And so that was part of the discussions when I was at a meeting here 10 days or so ago. And I really feel like that the real twist of it is that actually, if you just come back and start looking at the 2000 to now, which is over 20 years, 22, 23 years, in that our yields are not as optimistic as the yield trend if you use 1990 to now, and that. But right now, at least, the market's really zeroing in on the attitude that everybody got the rain they needed and everything's going to be fine and dandy. I think we'll find out maybe as we go forward here that maybe that's not the case, because right at this point, the rain activity that that the Great Plains needs is really not on the forecast here until, I think it's at least 10 days right now again. So that being the case, we could further stress on some of these crops as we go into the month of May on the wheat side of things for sure. And at this point, well, I wonder what kind of planning scenario some of these people west of the Missouri are going to have here. Because the other twist of this thing is that it's got a lot of headlines this week was the fact that the Northern Plains snowmelt caused big floodings on the Mississippi, and the Missouri too. It's not the Missouri's not getting the respect it needs here. That's really a river that drains an area of the country that's highly important, particularly as to how much has been expanded here in corn and soybean plantings in the last 10 to 15 years. And back in 2019, we had a similar type of flooding situation that hit the Missouri River. And I think that could be something that could grab some people's attentions going forward here on that one. The Mississippi is important, though right now the talk is coming around on the Mississippi that they might be shut down from basically east corner of Iowa all the way north for 3 weeks. And wow, that slows down your exports coming down the river. And it also slows down all your fertilizers and chemicals and things like that that come up the river during this period when it's really important. To some extent, it's a lot of that's dry fertilizer, which could be switched to other things and that. But even then, that really complicates your cost of ingredients and also your timeliness of your crop preparation here for 2023.
Now, what's the factor that you think would bring more demand for U.S. wheat that indeed would be good news?
Well, I think the one big factor that continues to go along here, and it seems to be some interesting brakemanship that's going on here with the markets kind of have a jaundiced eye at what the Russians are talking about. The Russians really want to have completely a wide open situation on their everything back to the payment system, insurance, all that kind of stuff. And they're really pressing hard about that issue. At the same time, we've had a lot of issues in the eastern portion of the EU, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, these countries where they really have taken a little bit of the brunt of some of these rail shipments that's gone out, and they haven't really proceeded on. The EU wants to be a supporter of the Ukraine. It wants to get this done, but they really have to make sure the Ukrainians get the shipments moving through these countries, not depositing on the other side of the border. And so that's a real factor in this thing. There was agreement supposedly came out here late on Friday afternoon that supposedly got worked back out. It's highly important if that does, because the one thing is nuts about this, if the Russians decide that and at this point, there's a lot of world exporters that are really not sending boats in. They're wanting to get the boats they have out of there. They don't want to be in the middle of this thing if the Russians decide to shut this thing down. And so right now we're losing that demand, even if it somehow or other comes about May 18th, that all of a sudden it's open again. It's going to take us another month to get back up to steam again. So it's going to be an interesting scenario. That really makes things interesting in the U.S. Because without the U.S. crop being all that good, and then we might not have the Ukrainian crop, we could have an interesting twist in this thing of all of a sudden the world doesn't have some of the supplies of wheat that it has had recently. Now, I know the U.S. isn't a big world supporter, a world exporter on wheat, but the timing right now with Ukraine out, the U.S. out, Australia is pretty well done. Their shipments right now, it doesn't look like India is going to be shipping all that much stuff. And that's so all of a sudden wheat could be an interesting market as we go forward, particularly if some of the reports I've had right now, actually, somebody actually projected to me that there might be a number of Kansas for a crop size in the 225 to 240 number. That would be potentially half a crop in Kansas. I know we got some better crops in the soft red world, but on the hard red, which is your bread wheat out there. Highly important to the U.S. markets for sure, and then around the world, there's still people that buy from us too. So I don't know. Wheat is, to me, is this week's break in it was really, really overdone. Maybe we had a little bounce today, but I think the same thing could be said about corn and soybeans. I think a lot of these markets have really pressed themselves as the markets really reacted to what might be happening, but I'm not sure that the physical evidence shows that we have really got that we've really made a huge rebound in our prospects here in the U.S. I know the El Nino is coming, but what day does it show up and how soon it arrives is still highly important for our 2023 prospects.
And now, what are you looking at for the days to come?
Well, I'd say that from the standpoint of the markets right now, the U.S. Weather prospects are going to continue to be highly important. If we get a little bit behind on planning situations and that, and we're going to be kind of dress things up. We might have some states in the eastern part of the U.S. that are planting things and getting things along. But as we mentioned earlier, North Dakota, parts of South Dakota are still, having some major snow melts up there. Finally, I'm not sure that you're really saying that there's a snowbank up there, but at the same time, the moisture situation as it goes through here, and particularly in eastern Nebraska and southwest Iowa, there's been some flooding there. I think that's going to be important. I kind of soybean side of things. There's some talk that next week's numbers on crush are going to have a chance to maybe be the second highest, 197.5 million bushels that we've done on things. The world is definitely, and I think rightly so here, with Argentina's crop being so small, and that they're the real supplier of meal around the world. So I think the U.S. crushing industry, along with Brazil, of course, they're going to be crushing things out there and trying to cover some of that market too. But I think that the interesting thing is that both Brazil and Argentina have been promoting this idea of their currencies being directly exchangeable with the yen of China. And boy, that might not be the easiest thing in the world to get done there from the standpoint of dollar amounts switching through the world exchanges, and that because of the Ukraine at this point, or excuse me, Argentina at this point has a value that's probably in the black market about twice what it is in the official languages, official levels. So, wow, that's interesting. That's a tough one to figure out values out there. Actually, well, things there, I haven't heard a huge amount of Argentinians even taking advantage of the recent dollar sales of their crop and down there for soy dollars, as they say. So in reality, some of their exchange processes are already breaking down. So I'm not sure how quickly that's going to be. I guess I'm anticipating. I thought we'd have a little more sideways action this last week. We didn't. I think we are down at some very low levels, and I've even heard some of the U.S. Consultancies out there recommending people to be a buyer of their corn needs and their soybean meal needs at these levels. And I don't have any problems with that either. The biggest problem right now, the biggest thing right now is that what's going to be the catalyst to try to spark this thing for some kind of recovery. I kind of feel like that maybe the world volumes will be there. We've had the other thing that added to this break, by the way, I forgot to mention, was the fact that the Chinese were canceling corn at this time, so they didn't help the U.S. market with their cancellations of near 500,000 metric tons. So But I think that was a game that they were taking advantage of with the markets being on the defensive. And we'll see how it goes forward. But right now, Monday's crop progress numbers and how we get done, and as we go in towards the USDA's May 12th report. Now, this is an interesting one. Don't forget, this is the first time the USDA starts to put their world numbers together for the 2023-24 crop. And so it'll be quite important that how this market sees those numbers when we get there on May 12th.
All right. Thank you very much.
You bet. Take care, sir. And it's always good to discuss a market. This one was a difficult one, though.